Hey everyone, back with me this week is Alex Gladstein, Chief Strategy Officer for the Human Rights Foundation and author of two fantastic books, Hidden Repression and Check Your Financial Privilege. If you haven't read them, make sure to. They opened my eyes to the human rights angle for Bitcoin. So Alex, welcome back to the show. How you doing?
Great. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
I feel like there's a lot going on. So just update me on your world. You just came back from the Global Bitcoin Summit, right? What happened there?
Yeah, so an initiative we started last year is to bring together people working on Bitcoin from as many countries as possible in one place. And we do a little bit of that at the Human Rights Foundation's main really big event, the Oslo Freedom Forum, which is more of a festival over many days, with more than several thousand people. But to kind of more focus the on our mission, uh, at the Financial Freedom Program at HRF on you know better using Bitcoin as a human rights tool. We are now doing this thing in conjunction with Bitcoin Park in Nashville, an incredible co-working space slash community center slash incubator slash just sort of hub for Bitcoin activity, run by Rod Rudy and Matt Odell and Harry Suddock. It's just an incredible place. So it's befitting for the venue. So we started last year. I just got back from this year's iteration. So we had basically people working on freedom tech, Bitcoin, Nostr, eCash from more than 60 countries. It was about 130 people total, but I mean, literally from everywhere from Afghanistan to Zimbabwe. And we got together for a couple of days of short presentations from different projects in the space, everything from Summer of Bitcoin to BitAxe to Open Dialogue Foundation to short interludes from luminaries in the space, to longer conversations with activists on tough subjects, ranging from we had a keynote from someone who helped bring down Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe and saw money die there, and his personal experience with that. And we saw content from people using Bitcoin to fund education in Iraq and Afghanistan. We had
Mm.
discussions with people from who survived the Rwandan genocide, and are now sort of pushing back against Paul Kagame there. We had conversations about Gaza. We had some focus on Lebanon. One of the attendees actually came last year. His name's Marco. He founded Bitcoin Dude Luban, which is like one of the Bitcoin organizations in Lebanon. And this year he wrote us this email being like, basically that he couldn't make it because he was displaced by Israeli airstrikes, and he had to like flee to the northern part of the country with his family. But he sent us a short video, which was very powerful. So we opened with that, and it was very optimistic. I mean, he was basically like, look, obviously this sucks, but with Bitcoin, I can move my family's value with me as we flee. So he was showing the utility of the technology. And then at the end of the event, the HRF president, she's from Lebanon, so we worked with her to find a very worthy, deserving humanitarian org in Lebanon that's helping people, and we set them up with a Bitcoin wallet. We worked with Anita Posh and a bunch of other people to figure it out, in terms of what's the best way to do this. And then we announced that we were giving a gift to them, and we had we put the QR up on the screen, and the whole community was donating Bitcoin directly to this org in Lebanon. No permission needed, peer to peer right away. No bureaucracy, and it was very powerful. So we sort of closed the event with that. But I think it reminds us that Bitcoin is a tool. It's a tool in service of a greater thing, which is human freedom. But it's a very powerful tool, and we're very fortunate to have so many people from so many countries working on it. And if you live in a particular place, you probably are in a bubble where you probably only really see, kind of the same people in the space or whatever. But that's not that's not the truth. That's a piece of the truth that you are seeing because of your bubble. So what we try to do is we
Yeah.
try to really break that bubble at this event, and have, a more representative picture of actually who's working on Bitcoin,
Right.
Nostr, eCash, et cetera, globally. So we couldn't be more hyped. It's like rocket fuel going to that event.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad you're shining a spotlight on all of these different stories around the world. CoinStories is proudly brought to you by Bitdeer, a global leader in disruptive technology for Bitcoin mining and AI. As a publicly traded leader, Bitdeer boasts a massive 2.5 gigawatts of electrical capacity and infrastructure under development across 3 continents, positioning Bitdeer as one of the most diversified and power-dense computing companies in the world. Bitdeer's leadership pioneered the original advancements in Bitcoin mining ASICs and is now poised to disrupt the market again with groundbreaking new designs for the next generation of mining ASICs that are targeted to reach efficiencies of as low as 5 joules per terahash by late next year. Now they're leveraging years of expertise in data center and cloud management into high-performance computing through a partnership with NVIDIA. Join Bitdeer in reshaping the world of Bitcoin mining. Learn more at bitdeer.com and explore how they are pioneering the future today. I actually really wanted to ask you because when we are in this Bitcoin bubble, we do sometimes forget about all of these conflicts that seem to be accelerating globally, and a lot of people just really struggling in the Middle East as well as in parts of Europe. Can you talk a little bit about how Bitcoin is being used? I mean, right now, is it helping people who are struggling in conflict and war zones?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's a micro short-term impact of Bitcoin, which is indisputable, which is as a helpful tool to fight back against depression. And we're seeing that. We're seeing people adopt it as a medium for donations to activist groups who are under duress. We're seeing it as a way for people who are fleeing war or conflict to secure their savings as they move, to send money to people who are vulnerable. We're seeing this in action. I mean, it does stuff that fiat money can't do, because it's permissionless, because it's peer to peer, because it can't be stopped. So that's extremely important, and a very worthy gift to the world from Satoshi. Full stop. And that is what we work on at HRF. We're not speculating about the future. We're just focusing on what it does today and trying to make sure as many activists as possible know how to use it. I firmly believe that if every humanitarian and activist in the world knew how to use it, the world would be a much better place. So that's kind of where we're at. But longer term, there's the other part of it where it's like, well, if it does become an increasingly dominant part of our global economic system, it changes some things. And I do believe that it will reduce the frequency and the ability of some of these wars to be waged for a variety of reasons that are probably too long to get into here. But it's interesting to think about the duality. You have the short term today, what it does, how it's helping.
Yeah.
Responsibly, that's what we focus on. But then at night we can dream, and we can think about what's going to do long term when we don't have 1 or 2 or 3 countries or whatever able to print money to do whatever they want, and making the rest of the country, making the rest of the world foot the bill for that, where it would be all neutral and equivalent and equal in terms of the monetary root currency for the world. I firmly believe that would be a more peaceful, collaborative world. It wouldn't be perfect, but I think it'd be better than today. So I think there's both tech and then there's the hope. And one of the things that came out of the Global Bitcoin Summit, actually, from so many of the attendees, was that the hope is actually the biggest use case of all. Of course, the tech is amazing. Like the fact that you can have permissionless, censorship-resistant, debasement-proof money is a total revolution. But the biggest use case of all is really the hope that it gives people. It's pretty amazing.
I completely agree with you. We talked offline a couple weeks ago because I actually reached out to Alex. I was trying to get a local girls organization that does education and empowerment here in St. Louis to consider embracing Bitcoin, just from an education standpoint, potentially also from a financial standpoint.
Yeah.
And immediately they were so reluctant when they brought the idea to a national board and they heard Bitcoin. They got really spooked. And so, but the woman who was the contact was very curious about the human rights component. So I sent her some articles. I sent her the books that Alex wrote, and one of them that you wanted me to share was the article that you wrote for the Journal of Democracy, which is how to dictator proof your money. So can you talk a little bit about that, and how do you maybe start with people who, obviously we're 15 years in, we've done a lot, but so many people are still like terrified of Bitcoin when you first bring it up?
I think it's about credibility and meeting people where they are, right? So of course I've done some a lot of fun writing. That's had an impact for Bitcoin Magazine and in my own books. But when you're trying to if you're trying to convince someone, which wasn't necessarily my goal with those writings, by the way,
Mhm.
yeah, you can't give them something at Bitcoin Magazine. They're going to dismiss it out of hand as biased or whatever. So that's why it's important for me to be writing occasionally for mainstream publications that have nothing to do with Bitcoin, getting it on the radar of other people, and also being a more useful tool for helping people understand. The Journal of Democracy is actually sort of sponsored by the U.S. government. It's a creation of the National Endowment for Democracy, which was set up by Congress a long time ago to help promote human rights and democracy around the world. And regardless of the outcome of that, the point is they did set up a publication called the Journal of Democracy, and it's really like pretty independent. I mean, it's despite government funding, I think it tends to be pretty independent. But the point is, it's like hugely credible in the academic democracy space. Like it's the journal you would go to publish like a new theory you're finding about whether it's freedom or democracy, et cetera, et cetera. So the fact that they asked me to do a piece on this is very exciting. And yeah, I mean, it was obviously the first Bitcoin related article they've ever had. And I think those really go the distance. Like if you can do more stuff, like in the past, I've been able to do stuff for Time Magazine or CNN, or Wired, even get quoted in like the New York Times. Like that's I think where you want to be sometimes because it can really help move us forward and get us out of this bubble a little bit. And it can be something that someone at a nonprofit that you're trying to convince can look at and be like, oh, this is credible. This is cool. It's not like some, Bitcoin publication that's biased where people are, conflicted of, this is just something completely different. So very, very excited about that piece. Folks should check it out. It's got a compendium of a variety of Bitcoin use cases around the world kind of packed into it.
Yeah, I'll link it in the show notes. What do you think is at stake with this election?
Well, look, we're 8 billion people. The US is 4% of that population. But we matter a whole heck of a lot for everybody. So it is a global event. Look, obviously there's a variety of topics where you could say there's a lot at stake, right? And it totally depends on where you're coming from, what you care about. So, to give two examples, I would imagine that if your passion was protecting a woman's right to choose or having Second Amendment gun rights, that those things, there's big impact from who you vote for. Sometimes, people might accurately observe that on some topics, it doesn't matter who's in the White House, right? There's some things that don't seem to change, like the national debt, for example. But on other topics, like obviously it matters a lot, like clearly, like on the two things I just mentioned, the two candidates are going to have very different policies. Environmental stuff, like even putting emissions aside, just general environmental regulation stuff, there's going to be a huge difference between two candidates. And you might be on one side or the other of that, but obviously it matters. So, I think, every presidential election is important. Some of them have been historically very, very important. I mean, if you think about some of the things that have happened as a result of, and who knows, but like, Bush v. Gore, I don't know. Like, would Al Gore have invaded Iraq? I have no idea. I mean, maybe, but like probably not. So, I think the U.S. elections tend to be pretty freaking important. So, I think Americans should do what they can to exercise that right, even if they're a little disaffected or jaded. I get it. But remember, there's billions of people out there who would sacrifice a lot just to have your right to vote. So maybe think about doing that. Yeah.
Right. I'm really curious what the outcome will be, especially for Bitcoin, because I know a lot of people are becoming single issue voters, and they're like the orange team.
I think for Team Bitcoin, it doesn't really matter. I think for crypto people, it's a huge election. I'm not a crypto person, so I don't really care about how the U.S. government's going to classify a security that my friend printed. I don't. That's not something that I really care that much about. But if you're a crypto person and you've printed tokens and you've sold them kind of as securities without registering them, I mean, yeah, like it's the Democrats are going to come after you in a way that's probably more aggressive than the than the Republicans, given that the Republican candidate is printing his own tokens. So I think for crypto people, it's a monumentally big election, and they know it, and they're out there, being really, pro Trump. But for Bitcoiners, like whatever. I mean, we're a long term 100-year project. Like it's a bump in the road. There may be some differences. I highly doubt either candidate's going to like have a massively different approach to Bitcoin. Um, you know, I know some people are rumbling about there could be a taxation difference. I mean, there could be, but
Mm,
there could equally be that the Republicans are more draconian on national security.
mm.
Like remember the last thing Trump did before he left office was to try to go after Bitcoin self custody with Steve Mnuchin. So I don't know. I ultimately don't think it's a big deal for Bitcoin. Again, I acknowledge that's massive for people who issue their own tokens. That it's a big deal. That the Trump team is probably going to have people who may have even issued their own tokens or presided over such be in charge, whereas the Democrats are much more likely to look at that as a practice that is tends to screw people over. So they might, regulate accordingly. I don't know. We'll see. But I don't. I tend not to focus on that too much. I think we need to just continue to hammer on our mission of global Bitcoin education and adoption. Let's keep pushing. I think at the nation state level, Bitcoin kind of does its own thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was so disappointed when President Trump issued yet another altcoin. We won't call it by the other name. You
Disgraceful.
mentioned environment, energy, and one thing that
Yeah.
I recall from one of your presentations this year was that not mining Bitcoin is a waste of energy. Can you talk a
Yes.
little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, and just that might be an area where not necessarily a president, but partisan dynamics in America uh, may have an impact. Like it seems pretty clear that Republican governors are at this stage more understanding of Bitcoin's utility as an energy savings tool and a grid balancing tool for the grid for energy systems than Democrats. I do think that gap just narrows over time. But it's pretty clear that a bunch of Republican governors, at least, and senators are more bullish on that. And that's to their credit. And if that's going to be your issue, that's going to be your issue, and that's understandable. I mean, these people are more savvy on this. But in general, what I've been talking about is how people misunderstand Bitcoin's energy use.
It's time for a quick break to hear these messages from my partners who make this podcast possible. First up, Casa. It is so easy to set up your Bitcoin 3-key self-custody with Casa that I can show you pretty much the whole process in just 30 seconds. You're watching it right now. I recently switched to Casa for multi-sig collaborative custody and inheritance planning because of their enhanced non-KYC required privacy and the ease of this mobile app. Make sure to watch the tutorials and get your Casa plan for 10% off at casa.io/Natalie. Next up, Speed Lightning Wallet, one of the fastest growing Bitcoin wallets out there. Speed is a secure, low-cost way to send and receive Bitcoin and stablecoins instantly. The app is super simple to use and customers love it. Download Speed using the QR code on the screen or the link in my show notes. Use promo code CoinStories10 to get 5,000 free sats. And finally, are you ready to take control of your wealth? The Bitcoin Way is here to empower you. Learn how to take full self-custody and eliminate all counterparty risk. Set up your node and become the master of your own transactions and enjoy true autonomy. And upgrade your cybersecurity and protect your online privacy like I did. The Bitcoin Way specializes in personalized one-on-one training to help you become fully self-sovereign. Schedule a free consultation today.
I put up a big slide during my Nashville keynote of a BBC article. I think it said like Bitcoin uses as much energy as Argentina. Okay, well, what if you cross out the word use and you replace it with save? Bitcoin saves as much energy as the country of Argentina. Okay, that's really interesting, right? And that's what I'm kind of getting at is that the electricity that is spent to secure the Bitcoin network is usually electricity nobody else is using. Okay, so it's usually electricity that's going stranded or wasted or even just curtailed. at times, or it wouldn't have been built in the first place were it not for
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin. So that's really important to understand, especially as you go 10, 20 years out from now, where we think about the different energy systems we have. Fossil fuels, which are obviously very important, are modular in their consumption, in as much as you could have like a pile of coal or a barrel of oil. You're not just going to waste that. There is, of course, waste when it comes to like flared gas and stuff, which we can address and Bitcoin addresses. But generally speaking, like if demand goes down, they're going to stop digging oil out of the ground as fast, right? Like these are modular energy systems, generally speaking. Renewables are not, right? So you have both like baseload stuff, like nuclear, hydro, um, geothermal. These are shipping the same amount of electricity every single day, essentially, regardless of what the weather is or whatever, or what demand is. It's going to be the same. So demand's variable. So Bitcoin goes in there and it balances the grid, and it saves all the wasted energy. Then when you talk about intermittent renewables, like wind, solar, things like that, I mean, they are also very matched to Bitcoin in as much as, they often produce at times when there's not a whole lot of demand, right? So I think in general, what you see over time is the Bitcoin network eating all of that waste and excess. And that's why it becomes more renewable focused over time. Bitcoin is not like ideological, like the Bitcoin network, like the software system globally is not, it doesn't know, it doesn't have a stance on global warming, or it doesn't know. It's not like sentient, and it can't like think about, oh, I want to use this energy source or that one.
Mm-hmm.
But it's built in a way where it attacks waste. And generally speaking, you see more waste or more stranded opportunity in baseload renewables and intermittent renewables versus fossil fuels. So my thesis would be, over time, this thing goes towards 100% baseload renewable, intermittent renewable, and very, very little fossil fuels will be used for Bitcoin, because they're going to get, I think, pretty scarce and expensive as you go forward.
Yeah, you do a really good job, I think, simplifying and describing it, because for so many people, especially newcomers, the energy is one of the biggest hurdles. They feel
Mm-hmm.
like it
Totally.
adversely impacts the environment, and they shy away from it. But I had no idea, and people like you and Lynn who point out, it's like there's so much wasted energy around the world, and even if Bitcoin were to grow to be an asset worth many trillions of dollars, it would still only really use, several tenths of a percentage
Well, I
point.
mean, my argument would be, because there's three things, right? There's most of the energy it's consuming is wasted or stranded, or helping bootstrap systems,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or helping balance systems. Two, it's really freaking useful. I mean, I think most people who think Bitcoin is wasting energy don't understand how valuable Bitcoin is. So there's
Right.
that whole thing. That's number two. Um, and then, even beyond that, um, when you think about the fact that a Bitcoin miner, like the device, if you hold the device, and I have I'll show you this. I'm gonna set this up shortly. So this is a little bit axe I just picked up. So
Oh,
this is like a home miner you can get, open source, super cool.
cool.
One of these won the Bitcoin lottery in July and mined an entire block and got $200,000 of Bitcoin.
No
So,
way.
and you can run it off your laptop. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, obviously the chances of that happening, it's only going to happen once every 3-4 years, but it does happen. So it's kind of cool. So the point is, everybody should be mining at home. I mean, that helps decentralize the network. But the point is, this thing doesn't have any carbon emissions. Right? Miners
Right.
don't emit. Neither does an electric car. What matters is, what is the energy going into the car or the miner, and people don't
Mm-hmm.
understand that. So, the energy going into these miners is over time gonna be completely, essentially, what people think of as green or renewable. And B, the energy being expended to secure Bitcoin is very, very important. That's not a waste. That's critical. So in general, I think it would be awesome if like more and more of humanity's uh, electricity potential was used for Bitcoin. I think that would be a good thing. I mean, the more, not necessarily to an extreme degree, but like the more of our energy that we're using percentage wise to secure the Bitcoin network is probably a signal of how healthy are we as a global society. Like 100 years from now, maybe
Mhm.
not today because we're so early, but it signals that you've got a society, a civilization
Yeah.
that is able to uh, tap into new energy sources, that has abundance, that is never worried about energy scarcity.
Right.
So I think it would be like a pretty good kind of report card or litmus test of like how good is this civilization doing. Would relate directly to what percentage of their energy output is
Yeah.
Bitcoin. So I would want that to be pretty high in my civilization.
For sure. It's you mentioned how early we are. Alex, you've been through, I think, many more cycles than I have. I just wanted to get your take. I mean, if we zoom out, how do you feel about where we're at right now? I feel like there's a little bit of a, how would you describe it? Not a lull, but I feel like a lot of people are waiting for something to happen. And whether that's related to Bitcoin or sort of where we're
Yeah.
at with geopolitics or our national politics, I don't know. There's this feeling of there's something we're waiting for or around the corner. Some
Mm,
people are fearful, some people are very
yeah.
bullish. What are you feeling?
Well, I mean, I can't help but be optimistic when I get to meet all the people advancing Bitcoin around the world. And Nostr and to another degree eCash are also very exciting complementary technologies that are really, I think, going to have their moment in the sun soon. Um, but in general, it's bullish to have all these people collaborating on this project that I think is going to already meaningfully improves individual lives, but I think can really improve the whole human race in a big way. I mean, look, you got to acknowledge the darkness. I mean, it's brutal what's happening out there. But I wouldn't fall into a pit of despair in terms of it's always been pretty bad. I mean, I think today you get overloaded with this news and info because of the social media platforms and our ability to have citizen journalism. I mean, it's not like in the mid 90s this stuff wasn't happening. It was. It's just you didn't have cell phones and you couldn't see. But like there were genocides happening, horrible wars happening. It's just some people felt very as isolated and insulated from that or didn't know about it. I mean, in the same way that at times, like even today, like most Americans have no clue what's happening in Sudan, which is probably the world's worst humanitarian disaster, overshadowing everything else, whether it be Lebanon or Yemen or what's happening in West Papua or Burma. I mean, Sudan's probably pound for pound the worst, and yet it's never in the news and we never even hear about it. So that's always been happening. Today, it just comes. It's more in your face because of technology's ability for us to like see it, like with citizen journalism, but also just the algorithms on our platforms that we use for information gathering are sort of more geared toward to outrage us, right? Which is tricky. So I understand why people get very despaired, when they see what humans are capable of doing to each other. But I mean, it's kind of always been like that is the problem. But I do feel very, 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 very optimistic after seeing all these people and even people who've had their own personal lives disrupted by war, conflict, that they've been able to turn to this tool
Mhm.
as a way of deep safety and sort of a pillar to hold on to and hope. So yeah, the Bitcoin is hope thing cannot be stressed enough. I mean,
Yeah.
it is something that we can attach our common goals to, and we can work together on, regardless of who we are or where we are. And there's just very few other things like that. It's not like the internet or the
Right.
mobile phone or emails, like really like that. Stable coins, no, they just sort of expand and persist the current system. There's not really. I mean, space travel is a cool idea, but it's not. It's not relatable to the average person.
Right.
So this is something that has the human impact of traveling to some other solar system in terms of sheer science fiction audacity, but at the same time, every single person in the world can use it and benefit from it. So that's why I think it's like the most vital technology, um,
Yeah.
and also the most exciting. So it gives me so much hope. So I'm just going to keep working on this, and it will
Yeah.
be my fuel for me and my family and my friends as we move forward.
Well, before we wrap up, I feel like you do really have your finger on the pulse of so many stories around the world that maybe we haven't heard about yet.
Yeah.
What do you really wish that people would talk about or look
Mm,
into, or what do you wish there was a spotlight on that maybe even if we've attended the Bitcoin conferences, we might not fully be
sure.
aware of?
Well, look, there's a lot happening out there. I mean, I know that people are more probably aware of, creeping surveillance in the West, and uh, you know, maybe some people are aware of what's happening in this horrible situation in Sudan, backed by different regional powers, or uh, obviously what Israel's doing in Lebanon and the Palestinians is horrible. But a lot of that's in the news. I mean, Russia and Ukraine disaster. Um, but one area that I almost guarantee you nobody on this show is going to know about, is something called West Papua, which is the western half of the island of New Guinea. Is controlled by Indonesia. They've been occupying it since the 60s. And it's kind of like Avatar. It's pretty wild, like the movie. I mean, it's pretty similar. It's like you have these indigenous populations there that have nothing to do with Jakarta, like the Javan civilization, the Indonesian government. They're completely different language, culture, history. They look different. They talk. They're just not the same people at all. So they've been colonized by these people, and for their resources. So the world's largest gold copper mine is there, Freeport, operated by Freeport, which is an American company.
Yeah.
And of course, the people who live there get nothing. They get zero of the rent from the profit of this enormous thing, which is, first of all, destroying their environment, leaching chemicals into the rainforests around. I mean, remember, this is one of the most beautiful and pristine places in the world in terms of, it's got the Coral Sea, it's got one of the world's most incredible pristine rainforests, all these different things. And there's these huge, mining operations happening. And anyone who tries to protest against it gets killed. So the Indonesian government this week just sent thousands of troops in to protect the mine. And it's pretty nuts. Like, it's, again, it's a bit, I mean, not that I want to, and I would never espouse violence, but, you can empathize with why the characters in Avatar want to essentially, go after the corporation that's colonizing their space. And the same thing's happening here. But it's been happening for decades and decades and decades. And what's the saddest part is eventually all the gold's going to run out in about 2040, and then they'll go home. And then, but that gold that should belong really to those people would have been stolen and used elsewhere. So I would say that, like, West Papua is something that more people should consider looking at. There's like one social media account that's pretty good in English on it. I think the woman's name is Veronica Coleman. You can look her up. She's
Wow.
got some posts. Well, there was this guy. He's like a internet celebrity. His name's Speedy, and he just goes to different countries around the world. And he tried to go to West Papua, and the government canceled his plane tickets. So there was a whole thing
Oh,
about it a few weeks ago. But yeah, I would say that's a thing that's happening in our world
that's
that
crazy. Yeah.
maybe you want to look into, and maybe there's a way to help. I don't know.
Well, are there efforts to help these people with Bitcoin or anything?
Man, I don't know. I would say that would be a worthy cause. Obviously, I don't
Yeah.
know the first thing about it, but I would think it would start with language education, like trying to get information about Bitcoin in their local languages. I think
Yeah.
there's hundreds of different local languages on the island of New Guinea.
Wow.
So that would be an interesting thing to explore. But I think it starts with just informing yourself about it. Like, go
Yeah.
learn about it. Definitely don't drink like the Indonesian government's propaganda on it.
Wow.
Dig around. But it's a crazy situation. I do have a chapter on it in my Hidden Repression book, because the IMF and World Bank have been very involved in this situation.
I think I do recall that. Yeah, it really is terrible. And I don't know if you end up feeling this way with all the work that you do, but it's like if I think of any country where terrible things are happening and there are oppressive governments, I think of how the majority of the people, the public, is good and they just are trying to work hard and provide for their
Yeah,
families. And
hundred
it's like
percent.
this small group of ruling elite who are completely corrupt. And because
Yeah,
the money's broken, it's easier for them to kind of extract
yeah,
from the population. And it's just sad because it's like the governments are the evil forces, really.
yeah. Well, but sometimes, unfortunately, the people back the government, right? And sometimes it's a democracy, like in Israel, but in other times, It could just even be culturally that they, and that's what you see in this West Papua thing as well. Like I am pretty sure the average Indonesian is cool with it. Like from what I
Wow.
understand, yeah. I mean, look, the average American was totally cool with invading Iraq. Like we 73% approval rating from congressmen and senators on the eve of invasion. Now, obviously, there was a minority of people who were correctly angry, but like the average American was in favor. So it's like, it just remember, we can all be gaslit pretty bad.
Yeah.
It happens to all of us, and it's part of human nature. But unfortunately, a lot of these conflicts, the government is able to weaponize the other and is able to get populist support against the other. And whether that's been historically like something like anti-Semitism or what's happening in Southeast Asia, against Muslims in Burma, or minorities in many places like the Gypsies in Europe, et cetera, et cetera. The weaponization of the other is a very old tactic, but it's still
Yeah.
absolutely brutal today. Like it continues to just be tough. So again, like let's inform ourselves. Let's try to create more power among our local communities, and keep spreading this technology,
Right.
which unites us. It doesn't divide us. I think one of the biggest things about weaponizing the other is the ability to put them in a different camp, put them in
Right.
a different sector, try to define them as subhuman. Right. That's the goal. So Bitcoin is like a wrench in their plans because
Hmm.
we all get to access the same network, and we're all equal in the eyes of the network. So I think that spreading this thing is inevitably positive because it unites and it builds bridges instead of walls, and that's really what we need today.
Well, I love ending on that point. You're so right. Bitcoin strikes at the heart of this corruption that we see all over the world. And I love your message of hope. So, and going back to your book, check your financial privilege. We feel like things are going so terribly here sometimes, but we really have to check our privilege because so many people are struggling around the world. So, thank you for just highlighting these stories and for all the work you do. I'm going to link everything in the show notes. And Alex, it was great to see you. Hopefully, I'll see you in person soon.
Hope so. Thank you, Natalie. Good luck, and keep doing it. You're crushing it.
This show is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Nothing should constitute as official investment advice, and you should always do your own research. My inbox is open. If you want to share feedback or guest suggestions, just reach out at natalie@talkingbitcoin.com. Make sure you're subscribed to the show and check out my free newsletter, nataliebrunel.substack.com. I'll see you next time.